Welcome to Solitary RPG. Iron Ring Salvage is an adventure starter that I came up with when I was running through my first campaign of Death in Space. And in today's video, what I want to do is kind of walk you through the process that I am using for my adventure starter. One of the challenges for solo gamers or solo role players is sometimes you run into a roadblock getting started. You find a rules system, you read it, and you create a character and you want to get going, and you start rolling on some charts and things just aren't clicking. And what I feel I created for Iron Ring Salvage is just a nice little simple way of just getting your adventure started. It's not a full flushed out setting with all kinds of adventure seeds in it. It's really just some basic mechanics to get you started with your adventure. And today I just kind of want to walk through what those mechanics are. So that way, if you're interested, this might be something you look at for creating for some of your solo gaming, just some sort of an adventure starter. I don't know what else really to call it. It's just an adventure seed or a plot or a thread. You know, there's lots of different terminology that can be used. But let me jump into this and get this started. The Iron Ring is a setting in Death in Space. Iron Ring Salvage is a company that I came up with when I started playing Death in Space. And what it's kind of morphed into is just a great little adventure starter for solo gaming. Could even use it for a group setting, but it's just I don't know, it's just a little bit of information just to give you a reason to start rolling some dice and moving forward with your adventure if you're playing Death in Space or any sci-fi setting. Iron Ring Salvage is just a concept. Doesn't have to be used just in Death in Space. If you're playing Coriolis or Aliens or anything, the concept is still the same. So, what is Iron Ring Salvage? Basically, it's a junkyard in space. It's a company that goes around picking up um, parts and pieces of spaceships that are floating freely in space, or they deliver parts to broken down spaceships or crafts or stations or planets, whatever. It's just really a junkyard in space. And think about any automobile junkyard, it's the same kind of a concept. That's what the Iron Ring is. Iron Ring Salvage is just a company that works out of the Iron Ring, collecting up space debris and selling it for profit. So let me kind of get started. If you've been following my series on sci-fi gaming and Death in Space, you might have already seen some of this information, but I'll just kind of go over it real quick. I created a main character. My main character is Morgan, and that's the character I focus on. Then I kind of created Morgan's social structure on the Iron Ring. People he works with, people he knows, other important figures on the Iron Ring, some people that own companies, things like that. But this is just my starting place, is just getting some background for Morgan so that he could get started. And what I do when I'm playing, even if I'm playing multiple characters for my solo adventures, I still just focus on one particular PC when I'm playing. And for this particular PC, it's going to be Morgan. So what I'll do is just on a blank piece of paper is I'll just put in a big capital M, circle that for Morgan. That just indicates to me that that's the character I'm focusing on. To get my story started, I just want to put Morgan in a place on the Iron Ring. On page 106 and 107 in Death in Space, there's just a lot of different Iron Ring locations that you can choose from to put your PC in to get your story started. For my particular story, I'm just going to put Morgan on his spacecraft, which is called the Bonefish. It's one of the things, one of the backstories for Morgan is he's trying to get off the Iron Ring, and it is a junkyard. So he has been slowly putting together a spacecraft that he can travel off the Iron Ring and go explore the galaxy or go to another planet or just find a better place to live. And basically, he's going to be doing what he's always doing, which is just kind of working on his craft. So he's just cleaning things up, just getting some work done on his spacecraft. Then what's going to take place is Morgan's going to get a contract or he's going to get a job. And this is pretty straightforward stuff. He works for the Iron Ring Salvage, and his boss is Nico. And Nico will call him with a contract to go fulfill with the rest of his team. So this is just getting the story started. I'm not doing any of the RPG actual role playing aspect. I'm just doing more the gaming aspect right now, showing you how I kind of get my story off the ground, get it running. So he's going to get a call from Nico, and Nico's going to offer a contract. Basically, let him know, hey, we got a job. So we can just branch off here and just write job. In the main rules on page 126 and 127, there's actually a contract section that you can use. But for my starting adventure, I want to keep things simple. So I've kind of broken the starting contracts down to something that's really easy to just get started into rolling your adventure. It's either you're going to go repair something, retrieve something, or deliver something. And you can just use a simple D3 roll if you want to roll some dice and just roll. Got a 5, so on a D3 that would make it a deliver something. And I've broken it down a little bit further to if you want to go parts, cargo, or a person. For today, we're just going to deliver a part. I just want to get my story started, so we got a parts job. And I'll just branch off of this. Parts. And then how far away is this job, or how long is this job going to take? Again, it's another D6 roll and get you started. Keep it in the tray, Mike. So it's 3 weeks. So this job is 3 weeks away, or 3 weeks in total. So it's going to be about a week and a couple days to get there, deliver the part, and a week and a couple days to get back. So because if you play Death in Space, one of the things you're going to realize is uh, purchasing a spacecraft is really expensive. Also, purchasing weapons are really expensive. Death in Space isn't really a go out and shoot everybody up kind of a game. It's really a conflict resolution type game. It doesn't make easy access to weaponry, and you don't want to blow up other spacecrafts. But you're not probably going to be able to afford one. So that's why I feel the Iron Ring Salvage kind of works in this setting if you want to get into space travel, because somebody else owns the spacecraft and you're just working for that other person. So that's one of the concepts that I went with this game, because I really wanted to get into space travel. I just didn't want to play another fantasy game in space. So that's what I came up with. So I have a simple contract system. We're going to deliver a part. It's going to take 3 weeks total. So it's a week and a half to get there, a week and a half to get back. While uh, Nico and Morgan are talking, Baker, who is the pilot, is going to go get the spacecraft ready for the journey, the 3 week journey. What I'm using for this particular uh, situation is an Oracle roll, and I'm using the parts per million Oracle, which is found in the Player's Guide to Solo Role Playing. And I just make a simple 50-50 roll. This is a D6, 2D6 table, which I like because I'm using Year Zero mini rules, which is a D6 system. So I like keeping everything cohesive. So we're just doing a 50-50. There's no modifier. We just roll. We rolled a 7. There's a complication. So when Baker goes to check out the ship, there's going to be a complication. And on that complication, I've created another chart. So what I say for a complication is something will go wrong with the spacecraft during travel. So now I've already kind of created a situation that's going to happen once we're traveling with the complication. And I've made a chart of 6 things. I rolled the 1. They're going to be low on fuel. So for story play, what will happen is something is going to distract Baker from checking the spacecraft. And you can role play that out however you want. So if you want to do a little story to say maybe Baker was um, flirting with a girl at the bar or something like that, and the boyfriend came over and got in his way. But whatever the story is, the consequence from the complication is he didn't check the spacecraft out correctly, didn't check the fuel, and they're actually going to run low on fuel during the adventure. So what we'll need to do is figure out when that's going to happen, which will be relatively easy with just normal rolling of the dice. So we've kind of got our story started. I've got, Morgan was working. Nico contacted him about a contract. It's a 3-week job to deliver a part. Baker went to check the spacecraft. It was low. It's going to be low on fuel. It's going to be a complication that will work during the adventure. So that's something we get to come back to as we're playing the game. Now we got to find out what the spacecraft is they're going to be delivering it to. We don't necessarily need to know what the part is. We don't need to get that particular about. You can, if you want, you can say it's the flux capacitor or whatever you want to call it, but it's just delivering a part to a spacecraft that's broken down in space. It's 3 weeks out, or it's a 3-week job, week and a half out from the Iron Ring, and the spacecraft. Now I've created a D50 chart here, but you can still roll a D66, and that's going to be 42. It's going to be the Lucky Lady. So the Lucky Lady is the spacecraft we're going to be going to. I could define what that part is if I wanted to, but as of right now, I'm not going to do that. All right, so we've got all that going. There's going to be 2 more crew members with this party, and that's going to be it's going to be C and Bo. That's it. So everyone's going to meet at the craft, and you'll have the 4 party members. So we're going to have Morgan, Baker, C, and Bo. So this is where our adventure is so far. And if you're not familiar with what I'm doing here, this is kind of a modified version of mind mapping. Normally you use pictures and different lines, but for me it's a great note-taking technique because everything I need to remember, I'm just kind of highlighting the key notes, and then I can fill in the voids later. The use of color is something I'm starting to do with my writing these days, because color stimulates the other part of your brain and hopefully gets more of your neurons firing. And again, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, just do some research on mind mapping. And I find it fascinating, but it's just something I'm doing. That's what all this is about. All right, so we're going to do our first adventure out. So we got our first week going out to travel. So we'll just call this week 1 and kind of get started. I'm just looking for another color to start that out with. So week 1. So we already know the adventure itself is a 3-week job. So it's going to be about a week and a half to get to the location, about a week and a half to get back. So we're going to have a 3-week adventure. Week 1 is we're going to do another roll on the Oracle table to see if we have an encounter. And I've kind of created a pretty simple process for this. So I've written up some information about how I'm doing space travel, but for the first week, it's just a 50-50 chance on the Oracle table. And if there's no adventure on week 1, then the likelihood increases by 1 for week 2. And if there's no encounter on week 2, then it increases on week 3. But the overall goal is until you get an encounter, the chances of getting that encounter increase each week. And then once you get an encounter, it resets. So it's not that every week is going to have an encounter. You could play it that way if you want, but again, we're just trying to get some dice rolls going and just start getting our adventures on the ground. So we're just going to do a 50-50 roll. So there's no modifiers using the table here. I rolled a 6. A 6 is no encounter. So on week 1, we have no encounter. So we'll just make a note of that. Just no. And then we just move on to week 2. And then we're going to go right back to the Oracle. But now on week 2, we're going to have an increase. So we're going to increase to more of a likelihood. So we're going to add +2 to whatever our dice roll is. So what do we get? 2, 3, 4. Again, no encounter. Sometimes this is what happens with solo adventuring, and when you start rolling on tables and charts, sometimes the dice just work for you. So we would say we're in week 3 right now, but we've got to get to the lucky lady to deliver the part. So we can start doing some role playing, and we can get into maybe some conflict resolution on the spacecraft if we wanted to at the lucky lady. Or we can just say we delivered the part and we're on our way back. I'm going to go with we delivered the part and we're on our way back. There was no complications. Just so you can kind of see the increase in the adventures. And I just want to get to an encounter so I can show how I come up with my encounters. So now that we're in week 3, we're on our way back. We've delivered the part. So now we're going to go up to +4 with the chart, and we rolled a 14, which is going to be yes and. So now we're going to get a more dramatic result on the encounter. But we got our adventure started. So now I want to look at what my encounter options are. And one of the things I like about this rule system, Death in Space, is there's actually a pretty good space encounter spread, a couple pages, that break down the encounters to more specific things. So you can roll a d10 to pick what type of general encounter, and then you can break it down into a more specific encounter. Or you could just pick whatever you want. Now, we already know we have a complication of low on fuel. Our encounter could be we run low on fuel and we stall out in space, and that could be my yes and. Week 3 is our encounter. We already have a complication because Baker didn't check the spacecraft out, so we could put that in right there. And I think that would be a good spot for that. Or we could roll up an actual encounter, and we can then resolve maybe the running out of fuel at a later time. But I think this would be kind of a fun way to get my adventure started. So we're gonna run out of fuel. So I think I'm ready to start going. So this is kind of what I created with my experience running through Death in Space. I wanted, if you watched my previous episodes, this was my first science fiction game that I've ever played, and I think I went a little bit more into the details of making sure the adventure was going to go off and things were going to work. So I put a lot more effort into keeping the game going. But I think I've created just a cool little adventure starter. Just enough to say, okay, I've read the rules for Death in Space. I created some characters. Now I just want to get started. I kind of just created a quick way to start rolling some dice and kind of worked us into a quick situation, a conflict. We ran out of fuel. Now we're adrift in space. So now I can really just get into the characters' interactions on the spacecraft. They start yelling at Baker, and things get heated, and then they got a call to get some help, and then I can do some oracle rolls to see if maybe some space pirates come along and they start getting into some kind of a conflict out in space while they can't go anyplace. But I that's what I wanted to create with Death in Space, was just a place to just a way to get started and rolling the dice. And again, the Iron Ring Salvage, the concept that I created, can be plugged into any sci-fi game if you wanted it to. Um, Debris is going to be in any of the sci-fi universes for the most part. So if you're just creating a junkyard, you got a group of people, a group of individuals that work for this company, and with coworkers and things like that, all kinds of problems can arise working together with other people. But the main thing is I'm just focusing on Morgan for the most part throughout this adventure. And I think this is just a fun way to get the story started. So I can now take this, I can just write up a little bit of a synopsis of, with everything that's going on, like a little one paragrapher, and say, okay, this is where we're at. This is how I've kind of gone from very mundane stuff that, if you're fantasy RPGs, you're all sitting around the bars, drinking and listening to music, and then something happens. Well, sci-fi, you could be sitting at the tavern and something could happen, but here I just kind of, I gives me a reason to roll some dice. We have a task ahead of us, with the contract. Some conflicts happened, not, pretty straightforward. But we ran out of fuel, and now we're adrift in space. So that's really what I wanted to share today, is just that general stuff I created for Death in Space. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.